Hello and welcome to RachAquarelle. I have another installment in my holiday art series today, and I'm going to show you how we can paint 10 gift tags very quickly. So these are my gift tags. They are about 4 inches high and just 2 inches wide, so they're pretty small. And I'm setting everything up right now. I thought I might use the tape just to kind of like keep the gift tags in place while I paint them, but I found I really didn't need that. So really didn't need any tape. I didn't use any masking fluid for these projects, so everything is very simple. And I'm going to start out with just 5. And by the way, all of these are going to be Christmas tree themed. I thought, if I want to work quickly, maybe I'll just get my mind into the mode of painting Christmas trees rather than trying to make every single one extremely unique from one another. And so what I'm going to focus on for these first 5 is just creating very simple trees and kind of shifting the color around. Obviously, they're all going to be kind of green. Well, they wouldn't have to be. You could definitely play with the colors. I kept my trees pretty much green, and I just shifted the colors between having more blue or having more yellow, even within the same trees, just to give them a little bit more visual interest. So for this first one, I'm just going to do kind of this simple zigzag shape, starting narrower at the top, of course, and then as I move down, I'm going to have much wider strokes. And I started out at the top with a little bit more of like a typical green, and then I added a lot more yellow as I worked my way down. Now I'm going to start at the top of this tree with a little more green, and I'm going to start adding more yellow. And what I'm doing with this one is I'm kind of course, keeping in mind that shape of the tree being more narrow at the top, but I'm going to kind of have different sections as I move down. So there's a little bit of space in between those. Of course, I like to let them kind of merge together maybe in one spot. So I'll always find a spot just to kind of let them come together so they're not completely disjointed. And again, as I move down, I'm just kind of shifting the color a little bit more yellow and keeping it very loose and simple. And these are nice too because you can just use a pen to write, to and from on these. They're light enough that you could even just write on top of the tree if you end up painting over the entire tag. On this one, I'm going to start with more yellow up at the top, and as I move down, I'm adding more blue. And I'm just kind of keeping my strokes very loose and leaving a little bit of white space in there. I don't want any of these to be completely solid. And you can see that I really don't have to even get into too many other colors. And I didn't really think of it while I was painting, but it would be actually fun just to kind of do these shapes, but in all different kinds of colors. And now for this one, I'm going to start with just some lines, and I'm trying to just incrementally make them wider so I get the sense of that, very basic tree shape. And as I move down, I'm just adding more yellows into my green, kind of running low on some of my paint colors. And on this one, I added just a little bit of a trunk, which I didn't feel I needed on most of them. All right, so I'm going to move these aside. And now I'm going to do the last one. And these ones are going to be really simple. This is basically all that I'm going to do for these. For the next 5 that I do, I'll start out really simple, and then I'm going to kind of embellish them a little bit more. So on this one, I decided just to, it's kind of the same technique I did on the first one, so kind of just a back and forth zigzag, but this time I'm going diagonal. And starting with more blue at the top, and as I move down, adding more yellows. All right, so that is pretty much it for these first 5 cards. I'm just going to set them aside, and for the next set, we'll start out very, very simple. We're going to just paint some really, really basic tree shapes with green watercolor. But then I'm going to add some embellishments with gouache. So I'm going to try not to, put too much thinking or, mental effort into these tree shapes, but I am going to try to just vary them a little bit so that they're each just a little bit different from each other. But these are going to be really simple, and they're also going to be solid. So I'm first going to start out with a triangle that's a little bit wider and shorter maybe too. That way I have more room to write at the bottom if I want. For this next one, it's going to be the same, but I'll make it a little bit taller and narrower. And I'm not worried about, having color variations in here. I basically just want a nice solid green. And now for this one, I think I'm kind of going for that look of the air freshener that you sometimes get for your car. That's kind of what it looks like to me, or maybe like a cookie cutter Christmas tree. Added a little bit more blue to it. So I'm not using the exact same green for each of these. Again, I'm just kind of shifting around the green between having more blue or more yellow, just to get some variation between the cards. I just don't really need any variation within the individual trees for this project. Simple will be better for this. Now I'm doing that same kind of cookie cutter shape again, just more curvy rather than angular. And just even a little bit more blue in this one. I really like this color of green. And then I'm kind of thinking about the last one, trying to think of what I can do that's maybe a little bit different, but also still simple. So I think that what I'll do for this one is just kind of do more of that zigzag, but I'm just going to keep it all a little bit closer together so there isn't so much white space. So I have a nice solid tree, but then maybe on the outer edges of the tree it's a little bit more organic looking than most of the other ones are. And now I just want these to pretty much dry, which doesn't take much time. In fact, that first one that I painted, and probably even the second one, should be dry enough at this point. But what I'm going to do is go ahead and just get my gouache ready. And I'm just going to use some really basic primary colors. Red, white, yellow, and blue is all that I need, and it's really all that I have. I've used gouache in a few other projects, and I'm very new to using gouache, and every time I use it I get a little bit frustrated with it, but this was actually the first time that I used it, and I felt like I was kind of getting a grip on this medium. I didn't feel quite so frustrated with it. So for each color that I mix up with the gouache, I'll probably be adding white to it just to help it stand out a little bit more against the greens. And I'm going to start out really simple with just some blue at first. And basically I'm just going to embellish these trees with, some basic, ribbon or garland, and then some suggestions of lights or ornaments on them. So really my whole intent here is just to make each tree look a little bit different from one another, and just to add a little bit of color to them to make them a little bit more interesting and unique. So on that one I just kind of added a blue ribbon all over it. For this tree I'm going to give it a little bit of texture. I'm adding in a little bit of yellow into that blue mixture, and that green looks a little too close to the actual green of the tree. So I put more blue in there. And I'm just going to give it a little bit of texture, like some little pine needles, I guess. And then I'll let this dry, and then I'll come back to it a little bit later to put some ornaments on it. And then I'm just kind of thinking about what I want to do with this, what kind of color I want to use. And so for this one, I also am going to decide, before I do any embellishments, I'm just going to kind of change the colors a little bit on the tree itself. So up at the top, I'm going to do this kind of yellowish green, and I'm going to kind of divide this tree into segments. And I'm leaving just a little bit of that watercolor showing around the edges where I'm applying the gouache. So I'm not completely covering up the watercolor, but I just want a little bit of variation in this tree before I put any ornaments or anything on it. I think the other times that I've used gouache, I felt like I had to use it really, really thick, and I was trying to minimize the amount of water I put in the gouache. But I've found that I can be a little bit more generous with the water than I originally thought. It's still not as watery as you would make your watercolors, but it does help the flow of it a little bit if you have a good amount of water. Okay, so I'll set that one aside now. Has a little bit more of a yellowish green at the top, middle green in the middle, and then a bluish green at the bottom. And for this one, I'm going to kind of mix up a pink. One thing I really like about gouache is you just really get these bright, almost neon colors. And fortunately, that's kind of what I've wanted whenever I use gouache. I'm going for kind of a more bright and playful look. So for this tree, I'm going to add like a rainbow ribbon or garland. So as I work down the tree, I'm just going to go to the next color of the rainbow. So I started out with like a red or a pink, and then a violet, and now a blue. Needed a little bit more blue. One important thing about gouache that I did not know until fairly recently is that you should try to only squeeze out as much as you're going to use in that painting session, because it's really difficult to reactivate gouache once it's dried. It's not quite the same as watercolor in that regard. I'm not sure what is different about the formula of gouache that makes it this way. I guess I assumed that because it's a water media and people often use it with watercolor and treat it like watercolor, I thought it would just very easily reactivate, but that is not the case. So I try not to squeeze out too much, so every once in a while I end up having to actually squeeze out a little bit more if I run out. So I think this one is going to be pretty much done. I don't want to go overboard on any of these. I want to keep them relatively simple. And this one already now has a lot of color in it. So I'll probably just leave this one alone at this point. And now for this one, I think I'll probably just want to add some ornaments to it, just some little splashes of color here and there. Definitely not going to worry about having like perfect little circles or anything like that. And I want to keep it pretty simple, so I think for now I'll just put these kind of pink or magenta ornaments all over it. And then I'll come in later and add just a little bit of violet ornaments to it. Oh, and I think I'll put a little yellow star on the top of this tree as well. I didn't really leave myself much room to do that on the other ones because the hole where I'll put the ribbon to attach these two gifts I put my trees a little bit too close to that. I'm going to just keep this one really simple as well. So I already have some color variation within the tree itself. So I'm going to add a ribbon on this one, but it's just going to be white, and that's pretty much going to be it for this tree. I think that having just the little shifts of green is good enough. And again, the whole point of this is just to keep these simple and to be able to get quite a few done all at once. Because with those other two gift tags that I made yesterday, as I was working on them, I was thinking, you know, what if I needed to make these for a whole bunch of gifts? How long would that take, and how frustrating might it be to deal with all of that masking fluid? So I really wanted to try to think of a much simpler and quicker way to make a lot of gift tags that will still be very beautiful and just a little bit simpler. So no masking fluid on these. I love using masking fluid, and I think that the different effects that you can achieve by using it are always worth using it, but it is a big matter of patience, for me for sure. Sometimes I find myself just staring at that masking fluid thinking like, okay, it's not dry, but maybe I can still work on this one area. And that's usually not a good idea. So for this one, I'm just going to kind of mimic that zigzag with some pink or magenta. Again, just keeping it very simple. And now I'm going to add some ornaments to this. And I'll probably limit the different colors of ornaments just to 2. And since this tree kind of has some nice texture, I'm going to also add to that texture by allowing some of these ornaments or lights or whatever they are to go outside the kind of defined border of the tree, just like I allowed some of those needle textures to go outside that shape of the tree. And then on this one, I felt like the reds were a little too red. I really wanted them a little more pink, so I'm going to go over those one more time with this pink that has a little bit more white in it, so it should be a little bit more opaque. And now I'm going to add some blue so I can get a nice violet. If you feel like the color you get is, you know, kind of not that pastel color, all you have to do is add a little bit of white. So these aren't as noticeable as the pink ones, but I think has a nice effect. And then I'm also just going to use this to lightly go over the blue ribbon on this tree, just to hopefully add maybe a little bit more contrast. Okay, so we're just about done here. I'm just going to add a few more ornaments onto this tree. I think I didn't really use much yellow on any of these, so I think I'll go in with just some nice bright yellow and white. And two, if you find that when you're applying the gouache and it seems like it's just merging in with the other colors that you're applying it on top of, it probably means that you either have too much water in it, or you may just need to add some white so that it can be a little bit more opaque. Okay, and then I'll just add a few more to the outside of the tree just to keep that consistent. And this is pretty much it. So just within about 20 minutes, we were able to make 10 gift tags. And there's so many different ways that you can kind of just play with these and figure out different things to do, different colors to use, maybe just, playing with the shapes. So there's a lot that you can do, and it doesn't require too much planning or trying to, make everything completely unique. I think just, pick a theme. Like I picked Christmas trees for this one, which I think is a good one because there's obviously a lot of variety within Christmas trees, but, you could do like snowmen, you could do different animals, you could do different shapes, you could do ornaments. So I think there's a lot of different ways that you could do these really quick and simple tags. Just pick a theme and then think of different ways to slightly vary the colors and shapes and embellishments. So yeah, that was it. I hope that you enjoyed this really simple project, and thank you so much for watching, and have a great day.